Hey everyone, welcome back to Rhythm Railroad. This is a little project I'm working on, which I'm really excited about. It's based around the staging that I have set up here. The idea is that because my staging is hidden and there's going to be a black curtain here, I want to make it as efficient and as simple to understand as possible, with as many avenues for information about the whereabouts of the trains as possible. So before I get into that, let me just explain how the staging yard works in case you haven't watched anything on my channel about that. So basically I have the whole thing reflected on my JMRI panel, which is, it's just easier to see it here. And I have this on my iPad because I'm going through web server, so it's just reflecting here. So I don't have to bring my computer over here. But anyway, so what's happening here is basically the layout main line comes down to these two leads. And once you get to this turnout here, basically what happens is the divergent track, which is the lower one here, is for all my inbound trains, which then, once you get past the lead here, it splits into the 4 tracks. And I have my track set up from the inside out. So it's track 1, track 2, track 3, track 4. So as you can see right now, there are 2 trains sitting on the inbound part, which culminate right here, right where this mark is, this black line. Now, the reason I did that, and by the way, these are the 2 trains that you're seeing there. That you're not seeing because there's no resistors on those cars, so it's not picking it up. But theoretically, there should be a 3rd red line on that middle line, that middle track right there. But the reason why I decided to basically split it in half from this point on is because when I originally designed the staging yard, I was coming from N scale. I didn't know how big an HO train really was. I mean, I can get a sense of it, but I had no rolling stock to like lay out. I had no, no concept of really how much trackage I needed. So what I decided to do is just I overdid it. Which I knew would be eventually beneficial, because even if the trains were shorter than the available space, I could always stack the trains, and that's exactly what I've been doing lately. So a long train like this one, which is like, there's like a bunch of auto racks and also the containers, might go, it's leaking past the halfway point, which is here, because, it can be. But the problem is that most of my sidings aren't as long as that train. So I can't be running a lot of trains like that. Those would be just through trains, or trains that are just gonna pick up, drop off things as they go. But most of my trains are more like these 2, which are more like 25, maybe 30 cars, depending on what size cars you're carrying. But the idea is that once you get to the halfway point here, then you could also have a 2nd train on the outbound side, which is from here on, and that's what's being reflected here. So I basically split the yard into 2 halves by cutting gaps right here on each track and making it, 1 block from here out that way and 1 block in this direction. And that allows me to have some kind of visual as to where the trains are. So as you can see here, my outbound tracks are completely stacked up. So I have a train on every single one of them. Now you're gonna say, wait a second, there's no trains here. Well, they're there, they're just shorter. There's a train that ends there, and then there's a train, tank car train that ends over there. So that's track 3. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4. You don't see anything on it because all I have on it is 1 locomotive all the way at the front, which is sitting right there. And that's so I can basically demonstrate what I'm about to do here. So that's the concept. And so far it's been great. And I think even just that is enough for somebody to say, okay, well, there's trains here and there's trains there. So I can't move these 2 trains forward, but I can come into these 2 tracks because they're available. Obviously, if that wasn't there like that. So that's number 1. Number 2 is I decided to make it even more of a visual situation by adding cameras. So I have a camera pointing at that halfway point. I have a camera pointing at the beginning of the leads into the yard, and then also out of the yard, so you can see both, both directions of traffic. And then I have 4 more cameras on blind curves, like where you can't really see the train turning. For example, like right at the end there's a big curve, so I put a camera there because you don't see any trains over here until you get around and then face the rest of the layout. So the 6 cameras are doing a nice job by showing me. Let me just take you over to the display, on the main display here, where the trains are. And you could switch out, like right now, see we're looking at that camera that I was just pointing out, but the front of the yard is here, and there are the 4 trains that are stacked up. The back of the yard is here, so you can see it from the other angle. So these are my inbound tracks, and those are my outbound tracks. So these 4 trains are ready to go out. And then also I have these other, like I have one by the leads, so you can see them coming in and out. I have one by that curve that I pointed out before. And, all that helps me out immensely. But even then, I wanted to make it easier, because let's say you don't, you're whatever, you're controlling one of the trains and you don't have time to get to this panel to see it. The other thing I tried to do was basically, use the block detection, like I said before. But what I'm doing now is just to add one more layer of information, is basically add signaling. And that's why you see this red LED there, which I'm sure you figured that's what I was getting to. So I've been working on signaling since about 2 weeks ago. I've been kind of like messing with the signaling. And I did start doing signaling at the end of, at the end of my N scale time, before I took that layout down. So I got a little familiar with it, but it's only been these last 2 weeks that I'm really getting comfortable with how it works. And I'm using a Digitrax SE8C board, which I know is typical for most people that do signaling. And I know there's a million other things out there, but I'm comfortable with that, so I'm going to go with that. And it's working great. So the reason why I have it mounted here right now is because it's just for this demonstration, and because I'm waiting for more ribbon cable. I ran out, and I need more clips too. So I ordered clips and 100 feet of ribbon so that I can, do the rest of my signaling. So that's why I have it here, just to demonstrate this. So here's what I did. I basically used the same concept as like regular signaling throughout the layout. So I've already set up a few signals throughout the layout, as you can see here. And I have some over here on the return loop. So all these are working not only through the turnout control, meaning if the signals are thrown or closed, you'll see them switch. But so for example, if I just do one of these switches, you see that the lights switch. Same thing here. So it's reacting to the actual turnout. But the other thing that it's doing is that I've assigned them to protect blocks ahead of it, and before it, but mostly ahead of it. So for example, this light, this signal aspect is actually looking at this segment of track to see if there's a train there, which will then affect the way these lights actually work. So if a train's coming this way, once it gets into the next block, both of these lights will drop to red to protect any other train coming in from going into there and potentially, having a collision. Unless it's set up this way, where the bottom light is saying, well, the diverging route is actually clear, so you can go around that train and go through. That's why you're seeing the greens all the way through. So everything is basically set up that way. Now, what I decided to do here, since there's no turnouts, is still set it up where it's protecting the block. So in other words, this aspect, which is this light here, is protecting the outbound block, which is that. So what happens is, right now it knows that there's a locomotive right now sitting on that track, and it's blocked, it's occupied, so it's not giving me a green signal because you know, I have something in front of it. So I think that's going to be probably the best thing. Like if you're looking through the cameras and you see that there's a red light on that track, it's so much, I can't get any more simple than that. And then when you see it turn green, that means you can go. So if I'm driving that train right now, I would be sitting there waiting for a green. So the cool thing about that is that you can manually change it by just hitting the aspect, and it'll change to whatever color, you know, green, or you can even get them flashing. But what I did is I basically took these very, very, very tiny LEDs that I got in like bulk for like nothing, that are already pre-wired, and they're so tiny. This is what I was using on my N-scale layout, that you can barely see the LED head, like the actual diode. So the reason why that's good is because they fit inside the track great. There's actually 2 lights in there, and you'll see the green one. It's right next to it, but it's enough to not only, you know, make things easier, but it gets picked up by the camera well enough. They're bright enough where you can see them, and there's no confusion, because what I was going to do originally was have actual posts, you know, like signal masts. But then I said, wait a second, if I do that, then there's not enough room to put a mast here, and, you know, all these cars are going to be crashing into them. Then I said, all right, well, I'll just build a bridge, a signal bridge, but then I'm blocking the camera with that signal bridge. Then I said, well, maybe I'll just come from the top down, and I'll just hang the signals down. But then again, it's interfering with the camera. So I said, well, if I put the lights in the track, then there's no interference, and it's clear as day. This is so simple. So that's what I'm going with. Now, the way I'm wearing it is basically the same way that I did my other signals. So I'm using, you know, a regular port from the 8 blocks that I have here, basically on my SE8C, and I'm connecting it through the ribbon wire to one of these Digitrax breakout boards, which are great, by the way, and I highly recommend using these if you're going to use signals, because not only is it easy to screw these things, the wires in, they're so finicky to begin with that you don't have to like solder or like, you know, try to squeeze them into these little clips or anything like that. The screws make it a lot easier, but also you have the plug for the ribbon cable right there. It just kind of slides right in. That's all 10 wires. And then you also have, I don't know if you can see it, resistors already built in. That's the best part, because the board, I think, is pumping out 5 volts or maybe a little under, and most of these LEDs are rated at 2 or 3 volts. So as you can see, this one's 2 volts, but you know, it's the resistor's taking care of it, and this thing's been on for hours. I mean, probably 6 hours now, and it hasn't burned out or, you know, gotten hot or anything like that. But they're bright enough so you can see it through the camera. So what I did is I basically just took a very tiny drill, I mean tiny, and just made 2 holes, and then I just fed the LEDs through so that just the head is, it's not even sticking out, it's just basically right at the top of the wood, pointing up. And then I took a little crazy glue from the bottom and just kind of pushed it into the hole so that the wire would adhere to the wood. So those aren't going anywhere. And obviously I'm going to do the same for all of them. Now the reason you don't see the green right now is because we don't have a green signal. Now let's, before I show you how that works, the way the SE8C works is that it's got a the way it's controlled, it's got everything's got an address attached to it. So every light and every aspect has an address. So for example, in this block that I'm using, which would be block 8, the address for the lights are 319 if you want it to be red, and if you want it to be the diverging aspect. So basically what I'm doing is I'm using, if this was, you know, this is a typical scenario. You have a 2 head aspect, and then you have single ones pointing in the opposite direction. So this would be 1 block, and you would be controlling 4 lights basically. But each one of those lights has a red, a green, a yellow, and then you can do flashing yellow and things like that. And each one of those things has an address attached to it. So for example, 319 is the diverging for block number 8, which is now going to be that light right there, which is this light right here, which is that block right there. So it's basically, you can see the eight blocks. That's why they call it SE8C, but it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So I use the 8th block, and now that code is 319, so that it's red. Now if I do close on the throttle, if I do the switch 319, and then I do close or throw, it'll switch between green and red. 320 would be probably your yellow, and then you go to the next aspect, which would be the B right here, and then this would be the A1 and A2 because they're stacked. So you got to read the manual for that to make sense. And this is what I was talking about. I was just getting familiar with how that worked, and it finally clicked. So when you put all that information into JMRI, you're able to control all of that, and in many ways. So literally, if I hit that head, I can switch the light color from here, but I don't want to do that here because there's other things that are involved. They do work, but that's not the point. The point is that you don't want to override it. You don't want to, you don't want to make it green and then you smash into something. The idea is that it works automatically. So what I did is I basically made that aspect protect this block. So if there's a train here, it has to be clear before this turns green. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to basically demonstrate that. Let me just show you what's happening though. So let me go back to the other view. So this is my Amtrak P42. It's sitting alone there. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to basically make it come forward past this turnout, which is the end of the block, so that it clears up that track. Now, once I'm in here, then I'm on my way out. So that means that I can take that train that's sitting on track 4 and bring it all the way up here. But once I pass this block here, that red light should turn green on this display here. So you'll see that turn green. So let's see if that's the case. Let me just find my throttle. All right, I gotta get my throttle. Right back. All right, so now that I have my throttle, here's what's gonna happen. I'm going to first clear up this block by moving my Amtrak train, which is number 203, out of that block. So you see it's red right now. And the Amtrak train is sitting right there on track 4. So once that gets past the turnouts here, and it's on its way, it'll clear up that block back there. And then I can see, once that happens, I'll see this light turn green. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to move my Amtrak forward. It's going to take a minute because it's going to do all the brake releases and all that stuff. But I'll try to go as fast as I can. There it goes. So just turned green. Let me just check to see the status of my Amtrak train. So you can see it's moving out. And you can see it head first here. And then it'll be going out to the lead. So I'm just going to keep that going out of the way. And I'm going to go back to my other display where I have the green. And what's going to happen now is that once I go past that light, it's going to go back to red because it's telling the train behind it that you cannot proceed. So here we go. I'm going to move that train forward. And you're not going to see the red because the locomotive is going to be on top. But once we go here, you'll see that it has changed under the train to red. So now I'm entering the next block, and as you can see, it's now going to release. It just did the 4th block because I don't have any resistors on these cars. But once I get the resistors, it won't release it until the caboose passes this point here. So right now it's showing that it's unoccupied, but normally it would be occupied on both sides. And the reason you see the red here is because that's the Amtrak train, heading out. So it's occupying the lead also. So the idea is that once this gets Once this train gets to the front of the line, meaning the furthest point in the yard before it goes out, it'll then free up the block behind it, and I could put another train in. But the train will come in and will only go up to this point because it will be red. So this is a pretty long train, so let me just speed it up a little bit. I'm not even sure if it'll clear this. Let's just go see on the monitor. I'm not even sure it'll fit, but let's see where we are here. You can see it moving along there. It still hasn't reached the turn, so. Should be coming around that corner any minute now. Here it comes. So yeah, it's kind of neat because you can see through all these camera angles what's going on down there without having to like actually look into the yard. So basically the end of the block is where the re-railer is. So I'm just going to stop around here somewhere. That's where I don't enter the next block. And there's my Amtrak making its way out. So I'm just going to stop that Amtrak because it's beyond. See, the Amtrak has cleared the lead. It's now on its way out. So I'll just stop it right there so I don't lose it completely. And now you can see that the block is clear, but the light is red. So that next train that's coming in can only go up to that halfway point, which is right there, and it's red. So as you can probably kind of guess, once I get the go-ahead from the dispatcher to take out my train into the layout, what's going to happen is once the locomotive's past that point, that's going to go back to green, because now it's saying, hey, there's no more train on this track. Go ahead and proceed to the next block. And obviously once the cars have, resistors, it won't do it until the caboose leaves that point. So let's just continue here with the long train. And you'll see that once I enter the block here into the lead, the light will go to green on the signal. I'm basically just chasing the Amtrak train right now. So I just entered the next block. The signal went to green, and the signal went to green. So that lets this train make its way forward to the next block. Obviously, if the caboose was in the way, but it had resistors, it would have still been showing red here and red here. So that's basically how this works. And I think it's pretty cool. And I really like the way I did it here with having the lights inside the tracks, because again, it's going to make it clean, it's going to make it easy. And once I get this, just completely blocked off and it's out of sight, you still have the cameras to kind of make sure that everything is working correctly. So the next step now is to basically install the rest of the lights for the rest of those. And I'm also going to put signals here, like at the front of the yard, so that I can also see them. I'll probably put them inside the re-railers, like right in the middle of the re-railers, so you can see where each block ends. And I don't create a short by crossing the gaps. And it's also the fault point, so that there's no collisions once I start pulling trains out, because as you can imagine, this train's cutting across, these trains could easily hit it if they're too far forward. So that's why I created the gaps a little bit on the safe side, so that I can avoid anything happening in the staging yard. The less access I have down there, the better, because again, everything's going to be closed off, so you're not going to see any of that. So I'm just going to go ahead and continue running trains here because it's fun. But yeah, on the next video, hopefully I'll have those extra lights hooked up, and I'll have my wire and all that stuff, so the SE8C board can actually be in the right place. But that's basically it. All right, I hope you enjoyed this. I certainly did. See ya.